Hello everybody, I am Shepples and welcome to my review for Legend of Grimrock. Legend of Grimrock is an indie RPG roguelike made by Almost Human, and is a game that is inspired by games like Eye the Beholder, Black Crypt and Dungeon Master back from in the 90s. The game begins where the four characters that you control throughout the game are being tossed into Mount Grimrock as a criminal sentenced for treason. If they are to escape, then their sentence is forfeit, and they are all free to live their lives as they please. However, getting out of Grimrock alive is another story. The game starts where you can either start the game with the default party, or create your own 4-member party from scratch, allowing you to choose their names, class, race, stats, and skills. Along with that, you get to choose whether to play the game in old school mode, which is a mode where you have no auto map and must either get through the game with pure instinct and sense of direction, or get out the grid paper and pen and map out the dungeon yourself, just like the games from the 90s. From the very get-go, you must find your way out of Grimrock by delving deeper and deeper into the dungeon. The graphics in the game are simply beautiful and cannot be faulted in any way, from the monster models to the textures, shading and lighting. They are simply AAA quality graphics. The sound effects are also brilliant. From the second you experience the sound of a door opening or gate opening, to the weapons and spells, to the monsters, once again the sound effects are AAA quality. The level up and skill system is fairly good, and one that I enjoy quite a bit. It is very simple and easy to grasp, but extremely effective. Each character class has a set of skills, and each skill has a total of 50 levels, and every few levels of each skill gives your character a bonus of some kind, be it extra health, energy, strength, or a new ability. It is a fun little level up system that I actually enjoyed using. The melee and ranged combat is nice and smooth and works really well, from the sound effects to the impacts and hit reactions of the enemies. However, it is here that the compliments of the game ends. The story in the game is simply awful. From poor storytelling to a horrible ending, the story is horribly executed and very hard to enjoy in any sort of form. Throughout the game there is very little story to be told, apart from the occasional dream where you get while resting, where a voice is talking to you. It is not until the end that any sort of plot is discovered, and even at that, by the time it happens, you've already guessed what it is that is going to happen. Along with the main plot, there is a side story about another prisoner who was making his way through the dungeon, whose journey you can discover through notes left behind by the mysterious individual simply named Turum. This side story, though slightly interesting, just feels like a filler for a lack of an actual story or plot that is in the actual game. On top of that, it's hard to even have a connection of any kind with Turum, as nothing is really revealed about who he was or why he was in Grimrock. It just feels like another character that we are expected to like, despite not knowing anything about him. As for the characters that you play, you don't even know anything about them. You know not what crimes it is that they committed that is considered treason, or who they are previous to the game. You've no connection with them, nor do you even care for their existence, other than the fact that you need to keep them alive to complete the game. Apart from that, the chances of you giving the slightest care about them is none. The magic system in the game revolves around a rune system, where you must activate the correct runes in order to cast a spell that you want to. As you travel through the dungeon, you'll uncover scrolls that will contain what runes you have to activate that spell. The problem with such a system is that it runs horribly, and in the heat of battle you can easily miss activating a rune or press the wrong one, and immediately makes the spell fail, and having to wait again before the mage can cast. It can also take up to 4 runes just to cast one spell, and by the time you have it cast, chances are your other party members will already be ready for an attack, and time gets wasted when it comes to attacks. Perhaps if it was a case of having to use the runes to learn the spell and then just have a list of spells to choose from then on would have been a much better approach. But using the runes to cast magic is just clunky and frustrating. The puzzles in the game are many, and even at that they're not very challenging, most being hard to even call puzzles. When it comes to them, there are two problems with them. First off, the puzzles become so numerous as you progress through the dungeon, it slows down the game completely, making an imbalance between puzzle solving and combat. Puzzles and combat are two of the most important aspects of any dungeon crawler. One floor in particular that is notorious for this is the 6th, where you must complete a number of puzzles in order to progress. The amount of time spent solving the puzzles compared to the combat time is immense, and just makes the game begin to feel more like a puzzle game with RPG elements, as opposed to actually being a dungeon crawler. The other problem I have about the puzzles is that they are simply just boring and in many cases pathetic, to the extent that a small child could simply piece them together, if not by logic, then by complete and utter mishap and guessing. The puzzles generally resort to finding a certain item, placing it in a certain area, or flipping switches in a certain order, or pressure pads, or something to that degree. None of the puzzles are exactly taxing or what I would call general puzzles, with the exception of perhaps one, but that would be it. Another thing about the game which I'm not too sure I like is the fact that twice within the game you get closed off from the rest of the dungeon, which stops you from going back and finding secrets you missed or doing something that perhaps you were not able to do previously due to not being able to kill a monster. This happens not only on the 6th floor but on the 10th also. If there are secrets to uncover within the game, I would like to be able to go back and find those I missed. However, due to this game being this way, it stops this from happening. It can be very frustrating on a player's first playthrough, due to them perhaps leaving some supplies behind for later, only to find that they are forever gone. There are plenty of secrets to uncover in Grimrock, but sadly most of them are very basic and can be found by simply finding a small button on a wall or a switch of some kind, making a large percentage of secrets not exactly hard to find. There are only a very small few secret areas that could actually be relative thinking process behind them. Throughout your journeys you will come across big iron doors. These doors at first seem well thought out and generally have a puzzle or a riddle of some kind behind them, but around midway through the game they are opened by keys, and then you get two last ones, which one contains a riddle and the other nothing, but is easy enough to figure out how to open. It feels that midway the developers couldn't think of any more riddles or puzzle messages to place on the door, so just left them with keys being required as opposed to actually something interesting like that of the other doors. There are no bosses throughout the entire game with the exception of the end boss, which is about as disappointing and WTF as you get in the game. I warn you now, the next few paragraphs of words here is going to be spoiler, so please skip ahead. I will note when there is the end of the spoiler. At the end of the game you must find 4 missing pieces to a machine, which supposedly will allow you to escape through a portal according to the voice in your dreams. Upon doing so you actually release the Undying One, which is what has been talking to you in your dreams all along, and after taunting you begins to head towards you. Here is the kicker. The final boss in the game is, wait for it, a giant metal cube machine. Yeah, that's correct. A giant talking metal cube that is apparently extremely evil, and you've just released it upon the world, and it attempts to kill you by rolling on you and crushing you to death. The only way to kill it is to get the weapon of power, which is technically just a weapon that fires a shock spell to short circuit the killer cube, and you must take the parts of it that you've put into it in the first place. Only once all 4 parts are taken off can you kill it by normal means. Upon killing it, though, the dungeon begins to shake and the endgame cutscene begins, and you are rewarded to the most sorry excuse for an ending ever. The ending of the game is shown where Grimrock is simply exploding with nothing left of it but a crater where it once stood. There's no closure as to what happened to your party, not that you would really care considering you knew nothing about them in the first place or had any connection with any of them. Between the ending of the game and its strange boss fight, it makes Grimrock one of the worst endings to a game I have had the misfortune to experience in years. That is the end of the spoiler, so we can continue on as normal. This game is not exactly very long either. You'll have it completed within about 10 to 12 hours at most, and have absolutely no replay value whatsoever. Possibly the only replay value of this game is the two-room mode, which is unlocked by finding two-room's remains and bringing them to a crystal of life. Upon doing so, when you start a new game and go into the character creation screen, simply type the name Turum for the character and press enter, and it'll start the game where you play as Turum and only Turum. One additional good thing about Grimrock is its community mods, and it may be that which saves it from being a complete and utter disaster of a game for me, where you can download fans' dungeons and play through them and go on countless amounts of adventures. I'd give this game a 4 out of 10. Overall, this game was one of the most disappointing games for me in recent years. Its story is badly told for what story there is. The game ending is god-awful, and its endgame boss is the most mind-boggling thing I think I've ever experienced as a final boss in a game, and not in a good way. The puzzles are simply poor, and the balance between puzzles and combat is in no way balanced. The secrets are mostly just simple find the button or switch, and the magic system is just damn right frustrating to use. It gives absolutely no incentive to replay at all, with the only chance of returning to Grimrock would be to play the community mods. To me, this game is simply just something that attempts to give the 90s dungeon crawler fans a nostalgic run with pretty graphics and sound effects, as that is all that Grimrock really has going for it. For me, it is nothing more than a poor but pretty nostalgic run of a poor dungeon crawler that had more of its development time and resources put into graphics and sound effects as opposed to the gameplay and story. It is by far one of the most disappointing games I have played in years. If you'd like to play Grimrock for yourself, you can purchase it on Steam and GOG for €13.99. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the review, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you, and have fun.